right, let's talk about fat. Ever really thought about what happens to it after you eat? I mean, it's not just about calories, right? It's this incredible journey. Today, we're going to follow a single fat molecule, all the way from your plate to the energy that's literally powering your thoughts right now. So let's get into it. And yeah, this is the classic example, right? How does that burger you had for lunch turn into the fuel that lets you, well, do anything? It seriously feels like magic, but it's not. It's this absolutely fascinating biological process called lipid metabolism. Okay, so where does this grand tour even begin? Well, right away, fats run into a huge problem. See, they're like oil, and our blood is mostly water. They just don't mix. So to get from your stomach to, say, your muscles, they need a whole special transport system. And here it is, the delivery system. These are called lipoproteins. The best way to think about them is like a fleet of microscopic Amazon delivery trucks. They package up all those fats into these neat little parcels that can cruise right through the bloodstream without causing any traffic jams. And you know, it's not just one kind of truck either. You've got this whole fleet. First up are chylomicrons. These guys are responsible for delivering the fat that comes directly from your food. Then you have VLDLs, which carry fat that your own liver makes. And of course, you've got the famous ones, LDL and HDL. You've definitely heard of them. They're the so-called bad and good cholesterol carriers. So, okay, the fat gets delivered, and a lot of it gets put into storage in our adipose tissue. It's like putting money in the bank. But what happens when we actually need to spend that energy? You know, when you're working out or it's been a few hours since you ate? Well, that's when the body has to go and unlock the vault. Just picture it. You're fasting, or maybe you're in the middle of a run. Your body can't use the energy from your last meal anymore. That's when specific hormones, like glucagon and epinephrine, act like the key to that vault. They send out this urgent signal to your fat stores that basically says, hey, we need energy out here now. And this whole unlocking process has a name, lipolysis. It's actually a pretty straightforward three-step deal. First, those hormones we just talked about flip a switch on a special enzyme. Then, that enzyme gets to work, breaking down our main stored fat, which is called triacylglycerol. We'll just call it TAG. And boom, this breakdown releases all the good stuff, the key products, right back into the bloodstream. And this is where you really see how incredibly efficient the body is. I mean, nothing goes to waste. When that TAG molecule breaks apart, you get two different products, and they each have their own mission. The free fatty acids, they head straight for tissues, like your muscles, where they're about to be burned for some serious fuel. And the glycerol part? That goes to the liver, where it gets recycled into glucose or used for other things. So cool. All right, so we've busted the fatty acids out of storage. They're in the bloodstream, on their way to their destination. Now it's time for the main event, turning those fatty acids into a huge amount of usable energy. And this all goes down inside the cell's power plants, the mighty mitochondria. This whole fat-burning process is called beta oxidation. It's a bit of a technical name, but it basically just describes how the fatty acid chain gets systematically broken down. And the location, like we said, is absolutely crucial. This has to happen inside the mitochondria. But there's a catch. See, the mitochondria are like a super exclusive club with a bouncer at the door. Fatty acids, especially the long ones, can't just waltz right in. They need a special entry ticket or a molecular escort to get them past the membrane. And that ticket is called the carnitine shuttle. Okay, so once the fatty acid gets inside, it enters this four-step cycle that just repeats over and over and over again. Think of it like a production line. In each pass-through, you get oxidation, hydration, more oxidation, and these steps create these little high-energy molecules. You can think of them like tiny rechargeable batteries. Then, the final step, cleavage, is like a pair of molecular scissors that snips off a two-carbon piece called acetyl-CoA. The leftover fatty acid, now a little shorter, just goes right back to the start of the line. This keeps happening until the whole thing is chopped up. So after all that chopping and processing, what's the payoff? Well, it is absolutely staggering. To put it in perspective, a single molecule of glucose, sugar, gives you about 32 units of energy, or ATP. That's pretty good. But one single 16-carbon fatty acid molecule, it nets a whopping 130 ATP. That is an insane amount of energy, and that is why fat is such a ridiculously dense fuel source for our bodies. Okay, but what happens when this fat-burning engine goes into overdrive? Like, say, during prolonged fasting or starvation, when your body is just breaking down tons and tons of fat. This system starts churning out way more acetyl-CoA than the next stage of the power plant can handle. It creates a bottleneck. But of course, the body has a really clever backup plan for this overflow. Ever heard of the keto diet? Of course you have. Well, guess what? This next part is the exact science behind how it works. It's all about what the body does when it's forced to find a backup fuel. And that process is called ketogenesis. Basically, the liver sees all this excess acetyl-CoA piling up and says, okay, we need to do something with this. So it starts converting it into these special molecules called ketone bodies. Now, this isn't the body's favorite way to run things, but it is an absolutely critical survival mechanism for times when glucose just isn't around. And there are 3 of these ketone bodies. 2 of them are amazing because they can be used as fuel by lots of tissues, including our muscles and, critically, even our brain, which normally loves glucose. The third one, acetone, is a bit different. It's volatile, so we actually breathe it out. And that's what causes that distinct, kind of fruity smell on the breath of someone who is in deep ketosis. When you step back and look at it, this whole system is it's a masterpiece of biological engineering, right? But like any complex machine, when parts of it break, the consequences can be really, really serious. And this is where all this biochemistry connects directly to real-world medicine.
So remember ketogenesis, the process of making those ketone bodies? Well, imagine what happens in someone with untreated type 1 diabetes. Their cells are starving for glucose, but they can't get it inside. So the body panics and goes into fat-burning hyperdrive, making a massive amount of ketone bodies. The problem is, these ketones are acidic, and when they build up, they can make the blood so acidic that it becomes a life-threatening emergency.
And let's circle back to our lipoprotein delivery trucks for a second. What happens if the cellular receiving docks for those trucks are broken? Well, that's pretty much what happens in a genetic disorder called familial hypercholesterolemia. The cells just can't grab the LDL, the bad cholesterol, out of the blood. So it just builds up and up and up, leading to a huge risk for early heart disease. So there you have it. From a simple burger to this intricate, beautiful dance of molecules inside our cells, lipid metabolism is just this incredibly powerful engine. And understanding how it works really gives you insight into, well, everything, from energy and exercise to diet and disease. The real takeaway here is that we are the ones fueling this engine, every single day with every choice we make. So it really leaves you with one big question. How are you going to choose to fuel yours?